live! Welcome to Live Action Roleplay with
Kai.
and Ryan. Cynthia's not with us today because she's preparing for a few things, including a trip out to Kubla Khan. So, we miss you, Sin. We love you. We're going to do some podcasting. Let's see, what are we drinking today?
What are we drinking? I'm taking it easy because I was sick last couple of days. I had my wisdom teeth pulled out and then managed to get food poisoning. So I'm taking it a little easier with just some fruit juice for now.
Your stomach hates you for this lifetime.
Apparently.
And I'm having plain old water because water is good.
Yep. Hydrate. Always. Hail hydrate.
Hail hydrate.
Which actually ties in quite nicely with the topic of our episode this time around.
Yes, how to prepare for your first LARP. But before we get to that, any shout-outs that you want to give out?
So, I have recently had, kind of by choice, I am now working on and trying to help run a LARP that will be upcoming in the future, kind of few months down the line. And we've already started establishing a community, and we're reaching out and engaging some of our players and kind of trying to involve people while we're building a good website for people to, get good info on and things like that. But it astounds me how kind of hyped people are for this new chapter of this kind of networked game, for people to try it out. So I'm hopeful that this podcast is going to be particularly useful to any of them or any other newer players of really any game. But who I'm giving the shout out to is the Northern California players of Dystopia Rising.
And I'm going to give a personal shout out to one of my friends that came and visited us on Maze Arcana from Tennessee, and her name is Nick and Chicken, and she's been exceedingly not just helpful on the set of Maze Arcana, but just been fun to hang around. And she managed to play in my Elminster High game as one of my NPCs, and I managed to play in her game that she ran in the Eberron setting with Rudy, Satine, my friends Tyler, and Paige. So I had so much fun with her. I was actually kind of sad when she had to go back, but I'm glad that she came out. We miss you, love you, and come back soon. Now, to prepare for your first LARP is our topic for today, and I think we both have lists.
We're going to be a little more factual in this one, rather than kind of going off into war stories and that sort of fun stuff. So I would say meat and potatoes. First we have to go into is what type of stuff should you absolutely make sure that you have in your gear for when you first go.
There are going to be some differences between going to a boffer LARP and maybe going to a fantasy LARP as opposed to a post-apocalyptic LARP.
Yep.
As well as a vampire LARP, but we're going to try to cover as many bases as possible, since a lot of the preparation is going to be fairly similar. But I think as the director for Dystopia Rising NorCal, what are some definite essentials that you would want to tell people coming into your game?
Well, so bare bones, I would always suggest that people bring something for sleeping. Make sure that you're comfortable, and we can go into details on that in a moment. You're going to want to make sure that you have good clothing. One of the biggest important things there is, while you're going to want to have a really cool costume, make sure that your cool bits of costume are on the outside layers of your costume, and you have either warm or comfortable things underneath. So you're not wearing some handmade leather armor that you've sewn together or put together with pot rivets, and then you're wearing it against your bare skin, and you're just tearing up your skin on these hard metal points and things like that. So you always want to consider comfort before looking cool, as you can always put cool stuff on the outside there. Next after that is you're going to want to make sure that you have things to keep yourself clean and things to keep yourself healthy. I would say environmental is important. Things like a good pair of boots, a flashlight, some pen, a little notepad. Those types of things are very, very useful. Then after that, I would suggest maybe a small little tool belt, a pocket knife, some those sort of things are very, very helpful. And then finally, with the broad sweeping kind of types of things we can get a hold of, you're going to want to consider water and food. Now, if we're worrying about a parlor LARP like Vampire, that's less of a trouble. I mean, at most you really need to bring a snack with you or something like that, right?
Right, and I would say if you're going to any parlor LARP, important things to find out or know where they are. Find out where the bathrooms are. Find out where food is. Just make sure you have that, because depending on where you go, some places are taking place at a park, some places are at one of the LARPs that I play in is at a city hall, and some of it is in a person's house. So in any case, just make sure you know where food and bathrooms are, and especially if you're in a house, please be respectful of the host of the house so that they are able to host again, especially if they're volunteering a house. That usually means they have to clean up, decorate, and prepare for a large number of people. So if in the case that you are going to a house, just be respectful of that.
That's very, very wise words there. So, a lot of buffer LARPs do involve meal plans or ways of getting a hold of food, but there are quite a few that don't as well.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, sometimes those meal plans aren't even actually being run by the people who run the game. They have that as a separate entity, maybe across the street or by a third party that comes in. I've seen a lot of variety in where food comes from, but if you don't know where your food is coming from, then you should absolutely make a plan for yourself about where you are getting your food. Mm-hmm. That might be a Target down the street, or a supermarket. It might be a bunch of MREs that you've picked up recently off Craigslist. Whatever you do, make sure that you have enough to keep you going for a bit. Because food and water are very important, and sometimes there might be hiccups where even somewhere that is supposed to have food, that might not go as planned. And that's not something that anyone intended, but you should always prepare for, unfortunate events to happen, so you yourself are not finding yourself crashing or in trouble when there'll obviously be potentially other people who might be in that kind of situation.
Especially if you have any food allergies that are particular, like if you're allergic to gluten, if you're allergic to nuts, if you're on a particular diet, whether that diet is medically needed or for otherwise or other reasons. Sometimes if you have a very particular diet, some meal plans might be able to have that, but in that case, it's better to bring your own because you know what you are able to eat.
Yeah.
Including with that, if you have any medications,
mm-hmm.
please also make sure that you bring those and that you have them with you.
Yep. And see that we can very easily, from that point of mentioning medicine, actually go straight into the ideas of hygiene and things like that.
Yes.
You're going to make sure that you will bring. So a lot of my advice stems from the assumption that you guys are camping. You might be camping in cabins. You might be camping in tents. You might be camping in the middle of some abandoned military base. I don't know. I hope you have fun. But here are some of the things that will make your life infinitely more comfortable. Number one, that I cannot endorse more, is wet wipes. Bring wet wipes or baby wipes.
Yes.
You will thank yourself so many times over just having the ability to once in a while just wipe yourself down. Or, you know what? They're great for toilet paper. But toilet paper should be a second thing that you bring as well. Mm-hmm. Because certain porta potties and those types of machines, or the plumbing of a site, might not actually cater to wet wipes going down plumbing, and you might end up blowing someone's toilet up, literally. And that would not be good for you. And it's not going to be good for anyone else there when the toilets are out of order because you flushed some wet wipes. So always consider that. as a very important factor.
Especially since showers may not be available on the site where you are, wet
Yes.
wipes are a godsend.
They are. And with that in mind, you should bring your own deodorant.
Yes!
Mm-hmm. And you should also bring, the things that keep your body clean, like toothbrushes and toothpaste. I'm a big fan of electric toothbrushes, but whatever you guys prefer to use.
When in doubt, also, I use mouthwash.
Yeah.
Because at least it will kill any germs, and when you're talking to someone, you will not actually scare them.
Because of traveling with larger amounts of liquids and things, especially in America with TSA, companies actually intentionally make travel size of almost everything. So you can make yourself a little LARP kit that is going to survive a good few games, and you only need to just kind of replace a few pieces out of it every once in a while. But you can fit all of that into a nicely sized little wash bag, and you'll have everything you need. And so you can handle all of those little things. You might even be able to buy like a little mini med kit to go with it. And honestly, if you can find something like that, I would highly recommend it. If you can't, then Amazon has a lot of good sources for things like car-sized little med kits that you just take along with you and stuff. They work really well. And while you might not necessarily be carrying that around with you during the whole event, having it just around is pretty beneficial.
Yeah, a good-sized travel bag will probably, good-sized travel kit will run you about maybe $5 to $10 of just the small mini things, and a decent first aid kit is going to run you about $20. The more elaborate stuff will run you more, but just having a first aid kit in general is just super handy to have. And in the case that you get some cuts and scrapes, you automatically have a first aid kit, and if someone else has a headache, you can also help them with that. Just because you have a first aid kit doesn't necessarily make you an actual medic.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So leave all of that to the medical professionals who are on site. Most sites will have a medical professional or will identify people with first aid training. So
yep. If you have any thoughts that you might be actually badly hurt, or you want someone to look at something and you get a second opinion from someone that knows a bit better than you, then you should always do that. But if you get a tiny little splinter or like a little bit of a grazed knee and you don't care, then get a med kit, rub an antiseptic wipe on it, stick a band-aid on it, go off, have more fun. Just know your limits and know what your body is capable of. And also don't take risks with yourself.
Yes, and even if you do scrape your knee or get a splinter and you feel like you want medical attention,
exactly.
Go get it.
Mm-hmm.
Just get it.
Yep. And no one will ever judge you for that. Because I don't know any LARPing community that is worth its salt that will, 1, look down on you for, or 2, turn you down for that. Because people are far more important than a game. And I personally will always drop what I'm doing if it's in relation to a game to help someone that needs genuine real-life help. If you have any allergy pills or Benadryl or things like that, in case you get an allergic reaction to something, those are always very good to have. And also a lot of American law involves the medical teams at LARPs. They're not actually allowed to give you medication. So if you want to have headache pills, like an ibuprofen or an acetaminophen or aspirin or anything like that, Benadryls and the allergy medicines and things like that, even down to something as simple as heartburn, like little chews that help your heartburn, bring them yourself. Because a lot of games cannot give it to you legally because it's medicine and you can't actually issue that type of stuff. It's a weird lore within America, but it makes sense that if I were to give you something that you were allergic to and I was not aware of, and it made you worse, then I would be entirely liable for that. And therefore it's much easier and safer for everyone if you bring your own headache pills and allergy pills and things like that so you can look after yourself. Also, bug spray and sunscreen. Bring a bunch of it. Because if you bring it, your friends, who more than once will probably be the one that forgets to bring theirs, will ask to use yours. So bring more than you need. Worst case scenario, you have extra and you just don't need to restock as often.
Yeah, and if you have the luxury or time, try to use it before going to LARP so you know how sticky something is, especially with sunscreen. Some people have told me some stories of I should have known more about having that there was a spray-on option as opposed to a lotion option, or vice versa. So,
a lot of the sports brands of the sprays are really good.
Oh yeah.
And in a physical activity LARP, they really, really help you. Likewise, personally, this isn't so much of an essential, but I feel this is a very smart thing, and I like doing it because, honestly, I like it when once in a while someone actually goes, oh wow, you smell really nice, why do you smell this nice at LARP? And that tells me that a lot of people don't really care how they smell at LARP, and while I agree with the general sentiment of you should be worrying about having fun, bringing a cologne or something like that just to give yourself a little fresh spritz once in a while does miles. Just like deodorant is important, bring something to make yourself smell a little better once in a while. Because it does make the difference, and while, yes, there are games where you're playing fantasy orcs and savage warriors and post-apocalyptic warriors, people do like for you not to be entirely realistic when it comes to the smell factor.
Right, and even the nice-smelling orcs are still going to attract more people.
Right? If you are concerned about water being available for washing or something like that, bring like a gallon jug that you've got specifically set aside. You might like even put on a little piece of tape written on it saying that this is your washing water, and bring some soap and maybe some hand sanitizer with you as well. As keeping yourself clean, especially just before you're going to eat something, because most meals that you're going to eat at LARP are going to be with your hands, or at least real close to your hands. You should always have things to keep yourself clean and safe so you can eat, and not having to be concerned whether or not, like, oh, I need to find a sink, oh, the sink's out of order, or things like that. You want to be able to look after yourself in that way as well.
Speaking of eating with your hands and doing such things at LARPs, do you have food recommendations for types of snacks you prefer bringing, or types of snacks or food you should avoid bringing to LARP?
Anything that you can... Okay, so there's two factors for that, and I appreciate you asking. One is how much trash does it leave after you've finished eating it? Because if you show up with something, you should probably bring a trash bag with you to take your trash home. Some LARPs offer trash disposal. Not all of them do. No one is your mother. No one is expected to clean up after you, except for you. So you should be an adult, and you should consider what kind of environmental impact you are going to make at whatever place you show up. And that isn't some more, kind of like, hippy-dippy, free the earth kind of mentality. It's just in a case of being considerate to everyone around you. And, often the sites and places that you're going to be playing, there's going to be a walkthrough at the end of that place getting rented out. And if you guys trash a site, then you might end up, the guys running that game for you might get told that they're not welcome back and they're not welcome to have games anymore because you left too many pieces of trash in weird little places that they might not have spotted. So always clean up after yourself. Bring a trash bag. And with that in mind, if you're going to do something like you're going to bring canned food, there's a lot of pre-cooked canned food out there. That's fine. Just make sure that you put it in a trash bag, because if you leave it out, bugs, ants, and also quite often wildlife. I have seen raccoons, real big fat ones, going through stuff that we've left out for about 2 hours, and we come back to our campsite, and there's a whole bunch of them. And honestly, I think the raccoons were pretty determined to stick around. Like, it took a few of us to actually mount up and scare them off, because if it was just one or two of us, they did not want to leave. And raccoons are dangerous. Some other places have bears. So always be considerate of what you're leaving out food-wise as well. So I think jerky is really good because you can reseal it. For vegetarians and vegans, there are some dried fruit and vegetable kind of options out there too, obviously. But canned food does work quite well, and crackers or things like that. If you are okay with sugary things, some candy bars and stuff work pretty well. But I actually quite like the protein bars that people take for fitness and things like that, as those are really good for keeping you going, and you are going to find yourself using and burning a lot more calories at a physical LARP than you expect you will.
Also, just to tag on to what Kai said earlier about people losing sites, I have seen some sites. While they will not outright tell them that they are not welcome back, they make it much harder for them to play another time.
Oh yeah.
So this is a real thing if you are not taking care of this site, especially if you do have the time and inclination for cleanup. Please do so, because the organizers shouldn't be doing it by themselves, if at all possible.
Absolutely. When it comes to LARPs, LARPing is a community. It's a group of people getting together to play a game. And if you get together to play, you should really consider everyone around you as well, and help kind of keep things together, keep people working together. And the best way to do that is to work together, as redundant as that may sound. Another factor when it comes to potentially mistreating the site, some sites might be like, well, you kind of trashed it last time, we're going to raise our rates on you, and that means the organizers of your game are now having to pay more, and more than likely that might result in them having to charge the players more money, because they've only got so much money coming in for the game, and if they're running it on a very tight basis, or more of a kind of a volunteer system where they're just doing this for the fun of it, then they might have to turn around and charge the players more to play, because of the fact that some people are not taking care of the environment of the game. And no one really wants to pay extra on tickets. No one wants to pay more money for the same thing that they got last month or last year for the same price. So, or a lower price, as it were. So always be considerate of that type of stuff, because the more everyone kind of works together, the better a game is, honestly. And I feel that's true for a lot of things.
Yes. Unless you have anything else on your list, like, I did actually want to go into how people socially should start preparing for a LARP, because we did go over, like, we actually gave them something very comprehensive about what to do if you're camping. But what about psychologically? Because a lot of people get very, very scared over their first LARP. In fact, like, I am running a LARP this weekend, and I've already had 3 people already telling me that they were scared.
Okay.
Because this is their first LARP.
Yeah.
So I had to think about, what do I tell them?
Yeah, emotional preparation is a very important thing as well. And I know we've kind of brushed upon it in some of our previous episodes. I think, well, I'm going to jump in and suggest one of the first things that I know that has always helped me LARPing. And it's never really LARP alone. If you can, bring a friend, or 2, or 5. The people running the game will appreciate it, and you will guaranteed have some people that you know on an out-of-character level that you can trust. And if you are having a moment where you are feeling overwhelmed, you have friends to lean on. Worst-case scenario, if you get injured or something like that, they'll hear about it, and they'll know, and there'll be a point of contact. So, there are lots of benefits to having a friend. That doesn't mean that if you feel like it, you should never go to a LARP on your own, because I know plenty of people who have done that and had amazing times. But there are positive factors for going out with a group of friends and checking out something new.
Especially if you happen to be introverted, and it's the rare personality type that will go to a LARP alone, and that's usually because they either have an adventuresome spirit or they've had previous LARP experience in the past. But if you're an introvert like myself, you usually want to get someone to initiate you so that someone can explain to you the world and understand through their eyes why they're so excited to be in this world. So sometimes it helps to have even a character tie with that particular person. Another thing I would recommend is to dress up in costume. That sounds so simple, but it is a huge thing about buying into that world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And honestly, a lot of the camping LARPs, at least that I've played, really do. I mean, it's not that they would like you to; they outright expect you to. It's kind of a bar that you must meet, and the bar is usually quite low. So if you're nervous about your costume not being good enough, that's okay. Most of those communities have actually a lot of photos and a lot of friendly people on Facebook groups and the like that are related to those games that you can often reach out to for advice and things like that.
So many people will appreciate that you put in the effort.
Yeah.
More than anything else.
So at this point in time, I see a potential for a little bit of a split juncture here. We can either keep talking a bit more on the kind of like social preparation, unless if you feel that you've got more to do.
I definitely have a little bit more on that
Cool.
side.
And then after that, we should go into the costume preparation, as I've got a bunch of tips for that.
Oh, actually, let's go ahead and go into the costume preparation now, because we just started talking about it, and I think prepping in costume is kind of like, it's almost like your own armor.
It is.
And
sometimes it's quite literally armor.
Yeah. And just because the psychological preparation in transforming into a costume is so important, let's go ahead and cover that.
Okay. There are also, while we started talking about your kind of kit to bring with you, part of my costuming advice is actually going to tie hard into what you should be bringing to keep yourself comfortable. And I did mention that you want to have an underlayer of kind of comfortable clothing. You should always make your costumes modular. And what I mean by modular, I mean in layers. If your character has this badass biker vest, then you should have that biker vest as your top layer. And if you're hot, you have fewer layers underneath that biker vest. If you're feeling pretty cold, then you should bring with you things like some thermals and some extra layers underneath, maybe even a full leather jacket or something that is fitting to that character that you would wear underneath that biker vest. So you can always kind of show off the personality of your character by, kind of having those few trademark items that really define like a visual storytelling aspect of your character, but at the same time, you're comfortable inside it. I have a character that's kind of a rockabilly kind of like survivalist kind of guy, like, a rockabilly from the past, and now is stuck in this apocalypse, and he wears a pompadour and he keeps his hair all neat and things. But I've got like some post-apocalyptic armor that I wear with that. Underneath that, however, I recently got a hold of I always get these two confused. There's coveralls and overalls. I think coveralls because they cover everything. Overalls are the trademark kind of redneck farming kind of like they're like pants with like a shoulder harness kind of thing.
Yeah, like pants with suspenders, basically.
Okay, yeah. So I mean coveralls, and I found like these kind of vintage looking kind of like thin denim coveralls for my character that have a very good like 1930s kind of rockabilly, like 1940s kind of vibe to them, but at the same time have a kind of like working man kind of like mechanic vibe as well, and that fits the portrayal of my character, and it's very comfortable to wear. And so having comfortable, interesting things is important. I think I might have mentioned this. Shoes are super, super important. It is much better to have shoes that you can walk around for hours at a time, even if it's just a parlor LARP. But you should always pick shoes that are comfortable before shoes that are cool, because it doesn't matter how cool you look in these amazing stiletto heels, and that can be anyone, guys or girls, but if you're wearing those fantastic heels that are making your legs look amazing, and you can't do anything in them, and the most you can do is just stand there and look pretty, it really limits how much fun you can actually have at a LARP, especially if it's a physical one.
Yes, so lesson learned from me. I usually try to wear boots as one of my nobles, and sometimes you have to know if you can run in those boots. As a result of me wearing boots that did not properly fit my feet, now I always have a permanent pain under one of my feet.
Oof.
So, lesson learned, boots, good quality boots that you can, or shoes. Frankly, and I'm not gonna speak for every LARPer, if you had a nice pair of black running shoes that you can at least run around in just to make sure your feet are okay, I'd be more forgiving of that than wearing boots that will potentially injure your feet if you're not careful. I mean, yes, try to keep it in genre, but if you can, I would rather that your feet be safe or your body parts be safe than you have a permanent injury like myself.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And also consider insoles. There are lots of running and sports or arch support insoles. So if you do have a pair of shoes that you really want to wear for your costume, make sure you've got something comfortable inside them. Additionally, at least for a camping LARP, bring pairs of socks. And I don't mean one or two. I mean bring as many pairs of socks as you think is necessary, and then double it. I'm not joking.
I know, it's so true.
I am not joking. And I will restate this a third time. I am not joking.
Are you joking, Kai?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So, here's the reason. And it's nasty and gross, and I apologize. If you want to get really grossed out, Google this into Google.
Oh my god, really?
Google image search trench foot.
Oh god.
It is a type of condition that literally means that it only happens if you don't change your socks. And you kind of wear them in really sweaty situations, and you know how your skin gets kind of pruny if you've been in the shower too long.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it goes like that through sweat, and then is left for a very long time like that, and it's never getting dry, you can potentially catch trench foot, which is what soldiers in World War I and World War II caught because they didn't have any ways of changing their socks and boots. And this is true in sweaty environments. This is also true in rainy environments. Anything that involves you getting your feet wet. And if you continue to have your feet stay wet, the skin can literally just kind of separate away from your foot. And I don't mean in the way of a blister. I mean it more peeling like an onion. And it is monumentally painful and damaging to you. And it can very seriously cripple you. So, if in doubt, change your goddamn socks. It is strongly encouraged. So please, please, please do that. It ain't good, it ain't happy, it ain't pretty. And worst case, you have a couple of extra smelly pairs of socks in your bag. No big deal, because the alternative is just not worth even kind of chancing. Please.
Yeah, I get a separate bag for those socks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because those things are more than funky.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, now, when we're talking about the visual representation of your character, here are a couple of points on what people notice the most about your character, and this might give you an idea of where to focus all of your details when you're wanting to express your character. The first is your torso, and your arms as well, if possible. Those areas people notice a lot, because your arms are in motion a lot and moving, kind of moving towards and moving away and so forth. Your torso is the largest part of your body. It's a lot of good real estate to write messages, both in terms of actual writing or symbology and ways of representing what your character is. If you've got black chainmail and a long robe, people are going to think one thing of you. If you've got giant full-plate armor, people are going to impress an entirely different thing. Take that further, if there's a character that's wearing fur, that's a much different story from someone wearing a wizard robe. And all of that storytelling is happening in your torso primarily. Next up, it should be your head. I'm not much of a hat person, so a lot of my LARP characters do actually wear hats because it sets me away from my character, helps people see the difference, and it also helps me see the difference, because your costume is... I was just about to say as much for yourself as for others, but you know what? I'm going to correct that. It's entirely for yourself, or far more for yourself than others. It's there to help you feel like you are someone else. It's there to empower you and make you feel different. And so you should be wearing what you feel like a badass in.
Yeah.
That could be a hat, helmet, scarves, anything like that.
Jacket, coat.
Makeup and facial tattoos are also very good ways of changing your face and helping you feel a little different, and other people recognizing you as a little different there.
Yeah, just be aware that if you're going to wear facial makeup or facial anything, like if it's hot, you may have to make some adjustments.
No touchy the face.
Because, no touchy the face. Also, if you have a particular design, you kind of want to try to stick with that design, so that's going to be some cost on makeup. So some people are willing to put that money towards that cost for their own preparation because it feels like they can identify with that character, and other people are like, a wig will be fine. And wigs are also an important part of costuming.
And wigs are another thing that, again, you should consider what you're doing. Wigs are very good in parlor LARPs, but unless you're a little more hardcore, wigs are quite uncomfortable at times at more physically strenuous LARPs. So, bear it in mind. I'm not saying don't do it. I've seen plenty of people do it, and it's very cool when they do. But just be mindful of all of these extra stresses that you're putting your body through. Now, after head and torso, or torso and head, rather, you should think about accessories like gloves, jewelry, belts, that sort of stuff. After that, you should be considering what you're going to be wearing on your legs for your character. And then finally, you should be considering footwear. That is not me saying that you shouldn't worry about your footwear. Your first choice in footwear should always be something that is comfortable, that you know you can wear for a long time without any pain. But if you're looking to zhuzh up your costume and raise the bar and make things cooler, you should worry about your footwear last, and you should worry about everything else before it. Because for most people, their feet are going to be at the very, obviously at the bottom of their legs. But what I mean is, most people don't wear super long boots. I wear a lot of boots that kind of either go up to the knee or go up to the calf. So those are a little more kind of visible. And so I would put that around the legs kind of accessory area if that is the case. But always, always, if you've got any doubt, always lean to the side of comfort. And insoles are your best friends when it comes to boots. Ankle support especially, because I sprained my ankle the first LARP that I came back to after 14 years, about 12 years of not LARPing, and I felt like a total dumbass for doing that. So it will happen to the best of us, and it'll happen to the worst of us, and it'll happen to most of us, so always keep care of yourself.
To kind of jump a little bit, that's closer to boffer than it is parlor. Sure. Weapons. I think one of the big things that people want to do sometimes when they enter a new LARP is they want to bring their own weapons. And the biggest advice I want to tell you is ask the LARP that you're participating in what weapons they recommend, because you don't want to acquire a weapon and then find out that it doesn't pass either safety standards or doesn't pass the type of LARP that they're doing. So just ask for recommendations before you do that. In fact, it's always good to just play in the first LARP so you know what to expect before you acquire your own weapon. Not to say not to ever acquire a weapon, but you at least want to make sure that if you've never done a physical LARP before, make sure that your fighting style actually complements the weapon that you want to use.
So with that in mind, I'd actually lean it more towards like attend fighter practices and like get a feel for the fighting style that you're wanting to try out. Maybe reach out to the communities of those games and find out about fighter practices. Or occasionally they have I've seen a lot of groups have Taco Tuesdays or like group meetups where you can kind of meet up and hang out with some of the people who play the game before the game happens, and that's a good way of establishing some new friends. As LARPers, I am one, Ryan is one, we are all one. Mm-hmm. We love to talk about our characters, and that's a great way to ingratiate yourself with other people, is ask about some of the cool stuff that they have gotten up to with their characters. And honestly, most of the time, it's super freaking cool stories anyway, so it's not like it's hard to listen. If you're going to be investing in a weapon, you should, best advice I would say is definitely look up the rules of the game, and most often those games do have very firm rules in what is an acceptable weapon and what isn't, and if you have any doubts, always reach out to the guys and girls who are running the game, and see if they can point you in the direction of the things that you want to get, because one of the worst feelings of LARP is either making a weapon or buying a weapon. Showing up to your first game and them telling you, this isn't safe, I can't let you use this, and now you don't have anything to fight with. Some games will lend you some of the monster weapons, some games won't. So it really varies. And again, this kind of case of like being self-reliant, make a plan for what you need for your first few games, and try to make sure that you hit as much of those kind of bullet points as possible. So what I was telling you about costume, that's kind of prioritizing things. Make sure that your costume is kind of like fitting to the kind of perception that you're trying to make your character, which is good. If you're LARPing for the first time, my suggestion is buy generic. Hit up thrift stores and things like that, because LARPing isn't for everyone. I hope it's for you if you read this, or you not read, but if you listen to this and you go off and you go practice at LARP and you go have fun and you get hooked for the rest of your life. I'm psyched. I'm really glad to hear that. But some people, they try it out a little bit and it doesn't work out for them. Or, more likely, you're going to try it out and go, wow, I love the game, but I don't want to play this character. And you've invested, like, huge amounts of money in, like, leather armor and a whole bunch of cool, crazy stuff that you're like, I don't want to wear this. It's uncomfortable and it doesn't work, or, it doesn't look good, or I don't like the character concept anymore, or I really want to be a magic user, or something like that. And if you hit one of those points, you might have potentially wasted your money. So it's okay to kind of have a more generic costume and then build up as you go, because it's almost like a level 1 character kind of coming in Worlds of Warcraft, and they look like they're wearing peasant rags, and by the time they hit level 70 you're like, what the hell, they look like a superhero. And that's okay, and that's really fun. After that, I said it before, but layers really do matter. If you're going to invest in a piece on your costume and really bust your ass making a cool piece, make sure it's going to be one of your outer layers that you can always wear. And I, myself, am a huge supporter of vests, because I live in California, and we have nights where it's like 40 degrees, and then we have days where it's 105. I like to be prepared on that. And I cannot encourage more on layers. But also, when you pick out your costumes and stuff, if it's going to be something that you're going to be wearing, then make sure that it's you can clean it or things like that. Make sure it's built to last to some degree. Because if you make something that has a whole bunch of metal plates and is attached to something that you're going to sweat into all day long, that might be a bad combo, because there's very little ways for you to actually clean that, and it might start smelling like a dead animal. the final little bit of advice I have in regards to the costume things is there's lots of other LARPers out there. All of us do have piles of costume that we used for old characters and we don't use anymore, or things that we wanted to use for something and we never got around to it. And reaching out to LARPer communities and being like, hey, does anyone have something a little bit like this or a little bit like that? Reach out to people, ask. The worst case scenario, people are just not going to respond to your message of you asking about that type of stuff. Best case, someone will have that perfect bit of costume that they don't want anymore, that they'll either give to you a steal or just give to you because they want someone else to use it, and you're going to go off and have fun with that piece that is so important to you but really didn't mean anything to them. Sorry, I know I've been rambling for a while here.
One thing I would also recommend with costumes, they're the best place to look for a costume for a LARP to even get a good character concept is your closet. Sometimes you might actually have that concept already in maybe a costume that you've already worn that you'll never wear again, or clothes that you've worn that you'll never wear again. And now you have a different opportunity to do so. When we covered this topic on a previous podcast, Sin had mentioned that when she went to a different parlor LARP for Vampire, she went and looked in her closet for business outfits because she wanted to portray a business attitude. Because if they have never met you until this LARP, then anything that you wear is already going to be new to them. So that is something that if you do not have the money or do not have the resources, sometimes either asking people within the community or your friends or just looking in your closet might inspire you to have the right concept for your character. But now I also kind of want to go into the social parts.
Absolutely. We have been nattering on about costumes for quite a while.
Costumes and preparing for camping, but there's a bunch of LARPs that are not that. They are parlor, including the one that I'm running myself. So the big one is don't be afraid to ask questions. Really, most people especially storytellers, are willing to help you, and most players, if they know that you're a new player, generally are. And if they give you attitude, just ask the ST. LARP communities are very welcoming, but some people are very particular in their roleplay. I would say that in terms of characters, if this is your chance to be whatever you want to be, I would say play something that you love, then something that you think is okay, just so that you could fit into a group dynamic. I know that some people feel pressured that you ought to play something that is a complement to all of the other characters in the game, and that's completely fine. But in the end, you're the one that has to live and roleplay that character, so you have to be the one that likes it, especially if you're paying a fee to enjoy that character. So even if you want to work with group dynamics, it's more important that you be happy with the character and the arc that you are choosing to play. Because the reality is, once you go out there as your character, you will end up finding plot, or other people will find you and like you or like your character just the way they are. And even if they don't, then that means that you became an impressionable enough character for them to contend with. And when you are playing such new characters, it's always good to make bold choices, and it's okay to do the dumb. You could do the thing that people would normally look at you as like, wow, that's such an idiotic thing, but you know what will happen? Those will also be the best stories, because those are stories that you get to tell again and again. And so don't be afraid to take risks. LARP is a sanctuary where you can take risks, and you can realize things about yourself. Very importantly, though, when you are interacting with people in your first LARP, very importantly, people's characters are not them. And I'm going to say that again. People's characters are not them. Someone can be a jerk or an asshole in character, but can be some of the sweetest people ever. And some people might be very standoffish or treat you gruffly, but that's not them. So make sure that you do make a point to get to know them out of character if there is a scenario like an afters or a place to hang out, or in the case of Taco Tuesdays where you get to meet them in person before you see their characters, then you get to have that separation, which allows you to feel more part of the community because you're role playing together and you're playing a game together rather than feel like there's any level of personal attack. Now, keep in mind too, sometimes people may not necessarily know your own personal history and something might be a little bit too close to the heart. It is okay to, at that point, signify to a storyteller or to that person, like, hey, I kind of have to cut out of the scene because of whatever reason, and allow yourself to take a breath. All of us have to remember that this is a game, and we are telling a story together, but not at the price of people being so uncomfortable that they carry some horrible feeling with them when they leave, or something that they feel like they have to go through because that is what their character would do. I have made them mistake, and I have learned since to avoid doing that by just being honest about that. I realize sometimes it's hard, but people are willing to help when you at least express it outside. And most importantly, have fun, because if you're not having fun, you can leave. And I'm not saying don't try to get into it. I'm saying that ultimately all of us who do this hobby, like Kai and Sin and myself and all of our friends, we do it because we love doing it, and we love bringing people into it because it is something that we love to share with other people. But if it is not your bag of tea, there is coffee outside, and we will still be friends, even if that activity is not for you.
We try to be as inclusive as possible, but we don't... You should never feel forced into it. One of the things with inclusivity is that a lot of LARPs that I've encountered have established community expectations and standards. It's usually something as simple as a TOS or terms of service, but not nearly as wordy. Just the expectations of how we should treat each other as better human beings. Sometimes people need reminding of that. But those are always a good thing to look up, as it helps kind of you get a beat on the expectations of that particular community. If there's quite a few things that they expect of you, then chances are they are quite interested in taking care of everyone. That's usually a good sign.
Speaking of taking care of people, much of LARP is being initiated by other people. Like myself, I was initiated by my friend Sarah into going to Vampire LARP before I dressed up in a tuxedo and tails and was a butler ghoul. But some things to keep in mind if you are introducing people into a LARP, because there is a special kind of responsibility that a person has when they bring someone into a new community. One of the first ones is to be available. Please be available for that person, but please do not be a helicopter parent for that person. By any means. Like, you're trying to bring them into a new experience, but you don't necessarily need to watch over them like a mama hawk is afraid that the little hawklings are going to fall off the nest. It's like, they're going to generally be fine. Now, if they need to come to you, then make yourself available, but allow them to have the experience to role play in that world.
Yeah, that's that's super solid advice. Do you have any more in regards to...
Yeah, I would say if you are bringing someone into game, be aware that they are their own fully realized character and they are not there to be your sidekick, unless that is something that you both agree upon and you both agree is going to be fun. Because in theory, sometimes being a sidekick to a person is great roleplay, but after a while that may not be such a wonderful thing to continue doing. So if that is something that they no longer feel like is fun, then go ahead and make those adjustments so that things are fun for both of you. Make sure that just be aware that this person can be your ally, but you do not speak for them, because they are there for their own experience. If you know that there are very particular themes in this LARP, make sure that they are aware of them, So if the LARP is a little bit is dealing with a lot of death, if it's dealing with a lot of PvP, if it's dealing with a lot of sexual themes, and and you're not sure how they will feel, just be upfront that this is that type of game, and allow them the either to accept that or to opt out, because there are some people who are just not comfortable with those things. Especially, I had learned recently that one of my friends actually has a fear of zombies, a legitimate fear of zombies, and I was wondering why she isn't into that. I'm like, oh, okay, I now respect that because I know that's an actual thing for you. We will leave that alone. I will not bug you to try to attend this LARP, because that is not a thing. And most importantly, after the game, if sometimes a person might be whisked into all sorts of adventures and you may not see them at all, which might mean that they're having a fun time, or that might mean that maybe they did want to talk to you. Just make sure that you connect with them after LARP to see if they liked it, to see if they had any concerns, because they're more likely going to approach you if they haven't approached a storyteller already, because you're their first in. If they're comfortable talking to a storyteller, that's amazing. But sometimes they're going to want to talk to you and just be there for them. So that's kind of a summary of what I would say to think about when you bring someone into an activity like this.
I agree. Those are all very, very, very good points.
Mm-hmm.
We've covered a hell of a lot of things. I've got a couple more smaller points on some of the equipment and things that you should physically bring with you to help your life be a little easier at LARP.
Absolutely. Make our lives easier.
Yeah. Do you have any other ideas on social stuff or costumey type advice?
I would say, I guess from my point of view, again, being an introvert, people don't ever know it, but I am an introvert, and my connection into a LARP community is going to be very unique compared to someone else's connection to a LARP community. And I want to use a phrase that you used a long time ago in a podcast, because it's so very apt, and that's don't yuck someone's yum.
That's fair.
That's
what super fair.
Yeah, what you enjoy in a LARP is not necessarily going to be what someone else enjoys in a LARP. And I enjoy politics, and I enjoy playing nobles. Other people like fighting, and other people like playing support characters, but that doesn't mean they're not fully realized characters, but they like being able to engage people. Some people like poetry, some people like dancing, and some people like being antagonists.
Yep.
Not everyone's going to have the same fun, but you're going to all have fun together.
Yep. And there's a lot of combined kind of group responsibility in that. You should always be aware of other people, and if you are doing things like being a bad guy, we've got an episode on how to be a good bad guy.
Yes.
Because just killing a character over and over and over again is not good story. And this game, when it comes down to it, you don't win at LARP. Nope. You tell stories.
Yes.
And storytelling is what people keep coming back for over and over again. If you keep killing a character until they perm, or keep killing one person's characters over and over again, the only thing that's going to happen is that player is going to stop showing up, and might be your fault.
Yeah. And
that's not how you play a game together. You raise each other up. Always.
What other pieces of advice do you have for equipment and things that to make their life more comfortable?
One of the things that I was gonna say just before that is, when we're talking about kind of goals and driven elements of LARPing, always try to err on the side of making actual breathing characters. Give yourself goals. Give yourself ideas. Honestly, making a goal for my character has been pretty hard when I get into a new LARP. So I like to wallflower a bit. I like to find out what other people's goals are. I find characters that my character enjoys the company of, and then I assist them in their goals. Doing that is still a valid way of playing the game. And, finding people to help so you make allies is a goal in itself. Making allies, making friends for your character to survive is a very valid strategy in playing a LARP. And also, it's much easier to tell a story when you have a group of people rather than just one person.
Right.
So that's important. Make a character, not a caricature. So if you have concepts, please make sure that your character that you're creating this off of is not, wouldn't it be funny if? Or,
Yeah.
I know this really funny joke and I'm going to make it the backbone of my character. That's not how you create a good character in a storytelling environment. That's how you write a meme. Mm-hmm. And memes are probably best left outside of LARP, in my opinion.
I will say, though, a character that I do play at Twin Mask, Contoboss, did start off as a joke. Because I thought a Demon of Sloth would never work as a concept. Mm-hmm. However, as I interacted with people, and started to feed people, because I had a shtick, as CW mentioned, sometimes you should have a shtick.
Yes.
I ended up interacting with a whole lot of people right away, and sometimes something that might have started off as like a one-shot, a character that you don't care about, might be like that character that you really care about like a few games later, because you now have developed a fully realized world. So if you are going to start with a very stock caricature, be willing to open up and make sure that they don't stay there. It becomes less impressive if they just stay like, this is the only joke that I'm always going to tell.
Yes, exactly. Like, if you do bring a character in with a somewhat more loose concept, then just be willing to let that character kind of evolve and change. One of the things that I love most about my character in Dystopia Rising is I came in with one profession. You can get up to 3. The 2 professions that I wanted to get when I first came into the game were not what I ended up with. And I let the game shape what my requirements and desires and needs were for continuing to play the game, both in and out of character.
Yeah.
So if you kind of let it almost as if you're piloting your character, and once in a while you just take your hands off the wheel and let your character drive. That is a much more enjoyable way of playing the game, and I highly encourage it.
One more thing from me. You can write 10 pages of the most glorious background of your character, but if no one ever sees it, when you roleplay with it, then no one will freaking care.
Yep.
So, ultimately, people will care about how they interact with you, but if you were some great god and people worshipped you, and you don't portray that anywhere in your character, then people will think that is weird, and that makes no sense. And that's not what we see of you when you play your character, because part of being a LARP... Or they'll never know, which is fine, but being a LARPer is about being present in your interaction, because that is the only way that anyone else gets to know about you.
Yep. Okay, so, and that's not me saying okay to cut it off.
No.
I just know we've got to wrap this one up.
We do have to wrap it up, absolutely.
So, a quick, concise, the things that I would strongly suggest if you're doing a camping LARP, I always encourage air mattresses, or even better, camping cots. Sometimes known as field beds or military beds. They're basically just like metal pipes and some canvas that fold out into a bed that's off the ground. Super, super useful.
I have a gym mat for that same reason.
Yep. Gym mats are pretty helpful. I think in order of quality, it goes like camping mat, then air mattress, and then a sleeping cot. Like, if you can get a cot that actually keeps you above off ground, so when you get out of bed, you don't have to kind of like crawl out of bed. You can just put your feet on the ground and you're sitting rather than laying. That's so much easier to get up, because I'm old and I am so over sleeping on the floor.
I'm older than you.
I know, but both of us are so over sleeping on the floor.
Yeah, that's fair.
Alright, get a good tent. If you need to tent, get a good tent, because otherwise you're just going to have a bag full of water. It ain't fun.
Nope.
Make sure that you have whatever is necessary to keep yourself comfortable in the temperature. With that in mind, do some research and look up the highs and lows of the weather that you are going to. And make sure that you bring clothing and sleeping equipment that will keep you comfortable for that. And that could range anything from like safety blankets and a space heater to just having a thin sleeping bag because you know it's going to be super hot. bug spray and sunscreen. I think I mentioned it before. If I didn't, it's worth mentioning now. If not, it's worth mentioning twice. Seriously, always get it, because sunburn sucks, and always put it on as soon as you're up. Baby wipes are also that thing that I've mentioned before. Always get them. They're so useful. Earplugs are actually quite beneficial if you have trouble sleeping. Very highly recommended.
And blindfolds.
Yes, those work if you're feeling kinky.
I needed sleep. But, okay, I'm going to not talk about that part.
Alright, sure.
Okay.
So, what else have we got? Oh, yeah. So you should bring a flashlight with you if you're planning on playing in a game that involves darkness. A lot of games prefer that you use a red light instead of a white light, because red light doesn't disturb night vision as bad.
Yeah.
So that is often a good thing.
Yeah, people forget, like, when you're fighting in the dark or when you're dealing with things in the dark, if you get that flash of light right in your face, you go blind. You actually cannot see anything because your eyes are no longer just in the dark. So if you're going to have to bring any light at all, just make sure that it is a tinted light so that you don't blind someone. Even if you're able to see through the dark, you might blind other people by accident.
I've known a few noteworthy LARPers to have something called a failsafe sheet. I've never personally had one, but I can see the merit in them.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically some information that includes a travel plan of if you need to leave. Mm-hmm. It could be things like train departure times and platforms, or locations and directions. Mm-hmm. A small map of where of the surrounding area. Mm-hmm. Often quite handy if you find yourself kind of lost. Mm-hmm. With that in mind, a compass is kind of useful if that is the case. Mm-hmm. It depends on the environment that you're actually LARPing in.
Yeah.
Some places are way out in the boonies of nowhere, and that can be very helpful. Mm-hmm. Phone numbers of all of your contacts. So write down important numbers. In the modern days, most people don't remember other people's phone numbers. I don't. I know that when I was growing up, I used to. But now that I've got a smartphone, I don't freaking remember anyone's phone number but my own.
No, I just go on my phone, call this person.
Exactly.
And that should work, and sometimes it doesn't.
Now, for some of the more bold of you, if you're actually role-playing in another country, bring a phrase book. Oh my god, bring a phrase book. And maybe some cash as well.
Well, yes, phrase book, cash. Know how to ask for the toilet.
Yep, exactly.
Know how to ask for food.
A little multi-tool is pretty useful. I'm a big when it comes to if you're going out and camping, bring some kind of like army or camping like kind of plates and utensils that all strap together in a small little bag.
Yeah, I will say though, I know that the original topic is how to prepare for your first LARP, and we just basically have you prepare for everything that could possibly ever happen if we actually ever went through a post-apocalyptic thing in Europe. Maybe, but that's because we want you prepared. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I feel is really useful is wear some gloves. I love fingerless gloves, especially in a LARP environment, because one, they make you look like a badass. Two, they really help preventing blisters and things like that, especially when you're doing a lot of fighting. Mm-hmm. They're comfortable. It's just more comfortable when I'm LARPing with some kind of fingerless gloves as opposed to being barehanded. I feel like if I fall over or things like that, I'm not going to hurt myself as bad. So another thing that is quite useful, I highly, highly recommend, get a plastic tote, like one of the bigger ones. Not one of the huge ones, probably under about 30 gallons. I think mine's about 24 gallons. Get one with a lid, and it has lock kind of snaps on the top of it. I put almost all of my LARP kit, my costumes and my camping gear and all that type of stuff into one or two of those. They fit into your car so easily, and when you're camping, if you're camping with a cot bed, you can slide it underneath your cot, so it takes up so little space in your tent or wherever you're camping.
Also, like another piece of advice, we also happen to have our friends Aaron and Cassie visiting us during this podcast, and they brought up a really important point, which is if you get a tent, not only should you get a good quality tent, but sometimes you might need to get a much bigger tent than you think you need for comfort and other reasons. Because one person tents are not really one person. They're usually like a little person.
They're half a person.
They're halfling.
Or a one-person tents are not one LARPer tents.
Right. That's so true. Okay, we're starting to wrap up. So, Kai, what are your social medias?
My social medias are Yokai Props, YOKAI PROPS. You can find me on the Instagrams and the Twitter and the Facebooks and all those kinds of things. You can also find Dystopia Rising NorCal on by punching that in Facebook. And by this time, our website will be up as well, which will also be dystopiarisingnorcal.com.
All right, and you could find me on Facebook and Instagram under Ryan Omega, except for Twitter, which is Ryan OMGA. You can also find me on a lot of shows on Maze Arcana, which is a Twitch channel. So I'm usually producing on the production team behind the scenes. So if you see live action roleplay, same as this podcast, you will find that I'm the person right behind it. And there will probably be an announcement soon on this podcast about something that I will be doing very, very shortly, but can't talk about it yet because still things.
Stop vague bugging.
What?
I'm teasing you. Stop vague bugging.
Well, you'll find out soon enough.
There was one thing that I remembered that would be extra useful to people going on a camping LARP game.
Sure.
Bring some plain black clothing for when you're doing your NPC shift if you are. Those are very, very useful. If not, then if you're playing a sneaky character, having plain black clothing as a secondary for some kind of disguise is also very useful. So yeah, do that.
Plain black clothing also in parlor LARPs are actually also a safe bet because you can be almost anything with plain black clothing. Also, before we forget, I want to so much thank our Patreon supporters because without you, we wouldn't be able to do some of the stuff that we are doing now, especially our friends at Twin Mask.
Mm-hmm.
That we mentioned like so often on our podcast. Our friends at Geeky Tees, who came out to play at Twin Mask.
Yay.
And then our friends at Lost Colonies, who are out in Virginia. So thank you so much for your support. If you want to be able to support us, you just go on patreon.com and you can find us under Live Action Roleplay. And I do have something on there right now, because one of the things that I do personally is I do updates from behind the editing booth about this podcast. But also, if we get 20 Patreon supporters, regardless of whatever cost that is, I will start another podcast.
Yep.
And it tells you what kind of podcast I plan to start.
Mm-hmm.